In this video, we're going to take a look at the Quick Mask feature of Photoshop. Now, Quick Mask is a way that you can paint down a selection pixel by pixel with a paintbrush. It's extremely handy. Oh, and you don't have to use a paintbrush, actually. You can use any tool that paints pixels. So you can use your gradient tool, you can use your eraser, you can even use clone stamp if you'd like. And then when you're done, the result of your painting is converted into a selection. It's extremely handy, but I have seen people who are just getting into Photoshop get really confused by it. And so I want to explain kind of where it came from, like what it's analogous to in the photography real world. And then I'll show you how you can adjust its settings to maybe make it work a little more intuitively for you. Because there are some folks out there who do find this a little unintuitive at first. I think once you get the hang of it, it's just fine though. So let's take a look at Quick Mask mode. You can activate Quick Mask mode by clicking on the icon for it at the very bottom of your toolbar, or by tapping the Q key, which is pretty easy to remember. But it's also easy to overlook, and I've seen many people who don't realize that this mode is on, and they think that they broke something in Photoshop because they can only paint this funny red color all over everything. When you are in Quick Mask mode, please note that you can really only paint colors of gray, just like when you're painting on a mask. So it's black, white, and gray. Also, your document actually says Quick Mask up at the very top of it. Be aware of that and everything will be fine. Now let's take a look at how this works. Currently, you'll notice I have my paintbrush active. Not any of the select tools, but my paintbrush. And that I'm painting the color black. Black, however, feeds back in the document as this pale, transparent red color. And if I paint just kind of a rough approximation of the head of my jellyfish here, and I can also erase that, by the way. I have access to all of my painting tools, so if I make a little mistake, I can clean that up. Once I hit Q again to get out of Quick Mask mode, it looks maybe at first glance like I have selected the head of my jellyfish. By default, the opposite is true. What I've done is by painting out the head of my jellyfish, I have said I do not want to select this area. I want that to be masked out or protected. Now, why is that? Let me tell you a quick story, if you don't mind me digressing just a little bit. If you have ever actually painted a photo mask before, and I'm going to assume that those of you watching this video have never actually done black and white photography or anything you've had to do sepia toning on in the real world. But if you wanted to do like sepia toning on a black and white image, the way you do it is you take your sheet of photo paper and you'd paint down this stuff called photo mask. Now the cool thing about photo mask is that this is exactly what it looks like. It is this pale red stuff. Basically what it is red colored rubber cement. So I mean that's the exact texture. If you ever played with rubber cement, that's exactly what this stuff is. You paint that down on top of your photo in any area that you do not want to be sepia toned, because it is like rubber cement and you're kind of sealing off, you're protecting that part of the image. Once that's on there, then you can take your image and dip it in your sepia toning stuff and go through the rest of the chemical process. And when you're finished, you can peel off that mask. It just comes off just like rubber cement and throw it away. And anything that was underneath the mask was protected and will not get toned. That's exactly how Quick Mask works by default. When you're painting, what you're doing is you're painting down the area that you do not want to be affected. And here's what I mean when I say affected. So here again, you see that I've painted down the head of my jellyfish. I hit Q to get out of Quick Select mode, and let's do something like just drop down a solid color, because it's real easy to see. Everywhere that I painted was protected from that effect. That's the default behavior of Quick Mask mode. So let's go ahead and throw away that solid color layer. Now, just as a reminder, any of your tools which manipulate pixels can be used to paint down this Quick Mask. So for instance, if I hit Q once again to go into Quick Mask mode, I don't have to use the paintbrush if I don't want to. I can instead grab, say, the gradient tool, and let's just drag a gradient from the upper left corner down to the lower right. And you see what we get. Currently, the upper left corner is completely that transparent red. By default, that mask will always be transparent. Do not expect it to be opaque. And then, of course, in the lower right-hand corner, we have no mask at all. If I hit Q to get out of Quick Mask mode, we see this really interesting selection. Notice how the marching ants look really kind of funky along this diagonal. That has to do with the nature of selections in Photoshop. Any pixel that is selected less than 50% will not get marching ants around it. And so what we have is this band of pixels that are right along that border. Now, you might have just kind of got thrown for a loop when you heard me say that. Yes, pixels in Photoshop can have a percentage selection. This means that they can be 25% selected or 75% selected, and the result of that means that they're only going to get just like 25% of an effect or 75% of an effect. To prove it, let's go ahead and drop down another solid color layer. Now, this is not a gradient layer. This actually is a true solid color, but look at the mask for it. The mask actually has a gradient that goes from black, no effect at all, to white, 100% of the effect. And of course, we can change the solid color, and it has a look very much like a gradient. Now, why is this useful to you? Well, let's take a look at one way it could be. If we grab our gradient tool, go into quick mask mode, so again, I'm just going to hit Q, and I'll grab my radial gradient and drag out a little radial gradient right here. Now again, by default, that has protected this red area. So the red area will not be affected by anything I do. Now, let's get out of quick mask mode. I'll go under filter and do a blur, and we'll perform a Gaussian blur, and we'll pull that down. It doesn't have to be too terribly strong. And click OK, Control D. And now I have a very cheap pseudo depth of field effect where everything else was blurred, but there's kind of a fall off, and we get to no blur here in the center. So it's kind of a trick, a way that you can use that. And even if it doesn't really look like depth of field, even if you're like, Zach, that doesn't look like depth of field at all, you can't deny that it does draw your attention here to the head of the jellyfish and away from these blurry areas at the edge of the image. So we'll go ahead and hit Control-Alt-Z a couple of times to undo that, and then I'll hit Control-D to deselect. So that's a look at the basics of how Quick Mask works. Now, some folks find it highly intuitive that you're painting out the area that you don't want to have affected. I find generally anybody who's actually done a chemical process involving something like sepia toning, where you do paint down photo mask, they have no problem with it. Those who've never been in a dark room or have never done that particular operation, sometimes they have a hard time going with it. The good news is you can fix it. If you take a look at your Quick Mask Mode button, you can double click on this guy, and this will open up your Quick Mask options. You can change the color to masked areas or selected areas. So if you switch this to selected areas and click OK, now I can grab my paintbrush, and once again I'll just kind of paint out the head of the jellyfish again, hit Q, and now this is what I have selected. So if in your head it makes more sense to actually paint down the areas that you want to have selected, that's fine. Just open up your options and switch this over. You can also change the color of what you want that mask to look like. So let me cancel out of here, and we'll turn this on. Actually, hang on. Now we'll double click it. So we can change the color to anything we like. So now, of course, our mask is green. The reason it's red is, again, photo mask in the real world is generally this pale red color. So red is generally, it's a good color to do if you're trying to think back to where masking really started. You can also control the opacity. If that 50% opacity limit is kind of driving you crazy and making it hard for you to determine what's selected and what isn't, you can change that opacity here. So definitely keep that in mind. So that's really all there is to it. I do just kind of want to mention, though, that you can flip back and forth and do some really wicked things with your selections. So, for instance, I can grab my quick selection tool and just paint out somewhere along the head of my jellyfish here, and then hit Q, and that immediately gets converted over to a quick mask. Now, I need to set this all back over to its defaults, just because this is what I'm used to. So that's where I'm going to leave it. But even with just this selection active, if I jump over to quick mask mode, that's suddenly a quick mask. And I can do anything to this quick mask that can be done with painted pixels. So if I want to, I can grab, say, the smear tool, or the smudge tool, excuse me, and I can start smudging that out, and you can see the result of that. I can go under the filter menu, and I can do all kinds of things to it. Like, here's a cool one. Let me just kind of throw this one out there. Let's get out of quick mask mode, and I'll hit Control-D to deselect. Now I'm going to go into quick mask mode, and rather than paint, I'll go under filter, render, and drop down some clouds. And so we get these funny, smoky red clouds all over everything. If I hit Q again, check out our selection. Even better, now we can go over to a solid color and drop that on there. And we have this cloudy effect, which is covering over our image, but these are clouds that are, one, transparent, and two, we can control the color of. So really quickly, you can see how this could be extremely handy. So we could just cover that in white, maybe pull down the opacity of it, and get this kind of quick murky look that immediately covers over our image. And it was extremely easy to do because of Quick Mask. So that about wraps up this video. Again, just as a refresher, Quick Mask is just a way for you to create a selection using your painting tools. That's really all there is to it. You can also edit an existing selection using your painting tools. So you can make a selection first and then hit Q to jump into Quick Mask mode, make adjustments, and then switch back by hitting Q again. That will, however, wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot for watching.